Before we begin today, let me ask you to just pause for a moment. Not to think, not to analyze, just to notice. Notice how often money enters your mind these days. Not as a problem necessarily, but as a kind of a background noise, a small worry, a quiet checking, a what if that appears even when everything else seems to be fine, doesn't it? Welcome back to another episode of What If You Live to Be 100. This is a space where we don't rush answers, we slow down questions. And so today, I want to talk about something that confuses many people after 60, including some of the most successful ones. I want to start by saying something that might seem a little strange at first. Some of the most financially secure people I know are also amongst the most anxious about money. Not in an obvious way. They're not panicking, they're not struggling to pay bills, they're not worried about survival. But there's a certain tightness there, a kind of restlessness, a constant checking, a sense that something could go wrong, even when nothing really is. For a long time, I couldn't understand this contradiction. Because if anxiety were purely about money, then surely the people with the least should worry the most. But that's not what I kept seeing. And slowly, over many conversations, I began to realize something important. What we call money anxiety after 60 is often not about money at all. Let me explain this through a story. I met a man some time back. Let's call him Mr. A. Now, if you met him in society, you'd probably describe him as someone who has done well in life. Senior position, good career, comfortable lifestyle. The kind of person whose opinions were once taken very seriously. For most of his adult life, Mr. A had a very clear role in the world. He built things, he took responsibility, he solved problems. I'm sure you know people like him, right? So people used to come to him with questions, with issues, with decisions that needed to be taken. His days were full, not just with work, but with importance. And then gradually, that changed. There was no dramatic ending, no fall from grace, no single moment where everything stopped. It was much quieter than that. His role slowly reduced. Meetings stopped requiring his presence. Younger people took over responsibilities he once carried. His phone rang less often. And one day, without any announcement, he realized something deeply unsettling. The world no longer urgently needed him. That's when the anxiety began. What surprised him, and honestly surprised me, was where that anxiety showed up. It wasn't about loneliness, it wasn't about boredom, it wasn't even about health. It was about money. He began watching markets closely, checking values more often, calling advisors, asking questions he already knew the answers to. On the surface, it felt like financial concern. But if you listen carefully, it was something else entirely. Because every question about money carried another unspoken question underneath it. If I'm not producing the way I used to, if I'm not needed the way I used to be, then where do I fit now? This is the part of aging we rarely talk about honestly. For most of our lives, we are builders. We add, we grow, we expand. We measure ourselves by output, by momentum, by usefulness, and money becomes one of the most visible proofs that we are still relevant, still contributing, still moving forward. Then, somewhere after 60, often without warning, that role begins to shift. You move from builder to observer, from creator to custodian. And that shift creates a kind of silent identity collapse. Because no one teaches you how to value yourself when you're no longer adding at the same pace. So the mind looks for something familiar, something measurable, something that still responds to effort, and it finds money. You get it? That's why people start asking the wrong questions at this stage of life. They ask about returns, they ask about markets, they ask about strategy. Not because those questions are wrong, don't get me wrong, they are not wrong questions, but because they seem to be safe questions to ask. They give the illusion of control at a time when control over relevance, pace, and importance is quietly slipping away. And here's an uncomfortable truth. The hardest transition of success is not earning money. It's learning how to live once earning is no longer the center of your identity. Let that sink in. Letting go feels unsafe for very real reasons. Because relevance feels fragile. Because control feels reduced. Because validation no longer arrives automatically. When you have spent decades being valued for what you do, it's deeply unsettling to enter a phase where your value is no longer obvious, even to yourself. This is where many people get stuck. They keep trying to solve an emotional problem with financial tools. But money was never meant to answer existential questions. At some point, and this is not an easy point to reach, the question has to change. Not how do I grow this money, but what kind of life do I want this money to support? That question changes everything. Because now the focus shifts away from proving and towards living. Let me offer a few gentle shifts. Not rules, just reflections. First, stop using money as a scorecard. Your net worth is not your self-worth. Second, ask your money to serve your life, not define it. What does peace look like now? What does freedom actually mean at this stage? Third, redefine usefulness, not usefulness as authority, not usefulness as productivity, but usefulness as presence, mentorship instead of management, learning instead of performing, contribution without visibility. This kind of usefulness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with applause. And yes, it feels uncomfortable at first. But this is also where something interesting happens. When people begin to live this way, the anxiety around money often softens. Not because the numbers improve, but because money finally knows its place. It becomes a support system, not a scorecard. You don't stop mattering when you stop earning. You stop mattering only if you believe earning was the only reason you mattered. If you're watching this and something inside you feels unsettled, even though everything looks fine on paper, this might be why. Nothing has gone wrong. You're not falling at retirement. You're not suddenly bad with money. You're being asked to build a different kind of life now. One that values depth over speed, presence over performance, meaning over momentum. And that transition doesn't happen in one decision, it happens slowly, awkwardly, sometimes uncomfortably. But if you allow it, it can become one of the most grounded, peaceful phases of life. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode of What If You Live to Be 100.